Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Aurora Base, watching the stars through the massive transparent aluminum windows. The coffee in his hands had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. 15 years. 15 years since. The last major conflict had ended, and the galaxy had been quiet ever since. Too quiet, some said. The base hummed with the low sounds of machinery and life support systems. Aurora Base sat on the edge of human space, a monitoring station that watched for threats that never came. Morrison remembered when places like this buzzed with activity, when every sensor reading could mean the difference between peace and war. Now his crew of 200 spent their days maintaining equipment and filing reports that nobody read. "Admiral, the morning briefing is ready," said Lieutenant Katie Martinez as she approached. She was young, maybe 25, and had never seen real combat. Most of his crew hadn't. The old veterans had retired or moved on to other assignments. What remained were peacekeepers and technicians. Morrison nodded and followed her to the command center. The room was large enough to coordinate a major military operation, but these days it felt empty with only a dozen people at their stations. Banks of monitors showed peaceful space routes, trade vessel movements, and routine patrol reports. "What do we have today, Martinez?" Morrison asked as he settled into his command chair. "Standard reports, sir. 3 civilian freighters passed through Sector 7. The patrol ship Steady Wind reports all clear in the Centauri region. And we received a routine check-in from Captain Hayes aboard the USS Vengeance." The USS Vengeance. Morrison almost smiled at the irony. The ship was one of humanity's most feared warships, a massive dreadnought that had helped end the Nexus Wars 30 years ago. Now it sat in the Titan shipyards with a skeleton crew, its weapons powered down, its mighty engines running at minimum power just to keep the systems alive. Captain Lisa Hayes had volunteered to oversee the ship's maintenance. She was one of the few officers left who remembered what the Vengeance could do when it was fully operational. Morrison wondered sometimes if she missed the old days, when ships like hers struck fear into enemy fleets across the galaxy. "Any word from Commander Blake?" Morrison asked. "Yes, sir. Intelligence reports that the Korthak Confederation tested our response time in the Vega sector again. They sent a small raiding party against one of our mining operations." Morrison frowned. "And our response? System defense forces drove them off. No casualties. Commander Blake notes this is the 4th such incident this month." The Admiral rubbed his temples. The Korthak had been probing human defenses for months now, sending small forces to test reaction times and defensive capabilities. They weren't looking for a fight, just information. They wanted to know how strong humanity still was, how quickly they could respond to threats. Other species were doing the same thing. The Zeller Trade Union had been delaying human cargo shipments. The Miran Republic had started claiming mining rights in systems that clearly belonged to human colonies. Everyone was testing the waters, seeing how far they could push before humanity pushed back. The problem was that humanity seemed to have forgotten how to push back. "Sir, if I may," Martinez said carefully, "why don't we just show them what we're capable of? Send a battle group to deal with these raiders. Let them know we're not as weak as they think." Morrison looked at the young officer. She had no idea what she was asking for. "Lieutenant, do you know why ships like the USS Vengeance were built?" "To fight wars, sir? No," Morrison said quietly. "They were built to end wars, to make the enemy so afraid of fighting us that they would rather surrender than face what we could do to them. But that kind of power comes with a cost. When you build something that terrifying, you have to be very careful about when you use it." Martinez looked confused. Morrison didn't blame her. How could he explain to someone who had never seen real war what humanity had become during the dark years? How could he describe the weapons they had built, the tactics they had developed, the things they had done to survive against enemies who wanted to wipe them out completely? The human military had spent decades perfecting the art of warfare. They had fought species that were stronger, faster, and more numerous. They had won by being smarter, more ruthless, and more determined than anyone else. When the wars ended, humanity had possessed the most advanced and feared military in the galaxy. Then peace came, and humanity chose to step back. They mothballed their war fleets, reassigned their soldiers, and focused on exploration and trade. The galaxy breathed a sigh of relief. Humanity had chosen to be neighbors instead of conquerors. But Morrison remembered the old saying, "If you want peace, prepare for war." Humanity had prepared for peace instead, and now every minor power in the galaxy was testing their resolve. "Admiral," called Chief Engineer Sam Rodriguez from his station, "we're getting some unusual readings from the deep space sensors. Might be nothing, but the computer flagged it for review." Morrison walked over to Rodriguez's station. The engineer was in his 50s, old enough to remember the tail end of the wars. His fingers moved quickly over the controls, pulling up sensor data from the outer rim monitoring stations. "What am I looking at, Sam?" "Faint energy signatures from the Kepler sector. Could be engine emissions, but they're not matching any known ship types in our database. The signals are weak and intermittent." Morrison studied the data. The Kepler sector was deep space, beyond the normal trade routes. Nothing should be out there except maybe a few research vessels or deep space explorers. How long have these readings been going on? The computer shows similar signals over the past 6 months, but they've been getting stronger recently. Whatever's out there, it's either moving closer or there's more of it. Morrison felt a familiar tingle at the back of his neck. In the old days, that feeling had saved his life more than once. It was the feeling that something was wrong, that danger was coming even when everything seemed peaceful. "I want a full analysis of these readings," he ordered. "Cross-reference them with all known ship signatures, both human and alien, and send a priority message to Commander Blake. I want to know if intelligence has any information about activity in the Kepler sector." As Rodriguez got to work, Morrison returned to his command chair. The stars looked the same as they had an hour ago, but somehow the view felt different now. For 15 years, he had watched peaceful space and filed routine reports. But something was changing out there in the dark. Morrison thought about the USS Vengeance, sleeping in its dock with its weapons cold and its crew scattered. He thought about all the other ships like it, the carriers and destroyers and assault, vessels that had made humanity the most feared military power in the galaxy. They were still there, waiting in their shipyards and hidden bases, maintained by skeleton crews and automated systems. The galaxy thought humanity had grown soft. Maybe they were right. But Morrison knew something that the raiders and the politicians and the trade negotiators didn't understand. Humanity hadn't given up their weapons. They had just put them to sleep. And sometimes, sleeping giants wake up. Katie Martinez was 3 hours into her night shift when the signal came through. The communications bay of Aurora Base was quiet except for the steady hum of equipment and the occasional beep of routine transmissions. Most of the base was asleep, leaving only essential personnel to monitor the vast emptiness of space. She almost missed it. The signal was weak, buried in the background noise of cosmic radiation and distant star emissions. But there was something about it that made her pause as she scanned through the communication frequencies. It wasn't random noise. There was a pattern, a rhythm that seemed almost familiar. Martinez adjusted the filters and boosted the signal. Strength. The pattern became clearer, and her heart started beating faster. It was an emergency frequency, one that hadn't been used in years. The old military emergency channel from the war days. "Chief Rodriguez, can you come to communications?" She called over the internal comm system. Sam Rodriguez arrived within minutes, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What do you have, Katie?" "Listen to this," she said, playing back the signal. "It's coming from the Kepler sector, the same area where we've been picking up those strange readings." Rodriguez leaned over her shoulder, his expression growing more serious as he listened. "That's definitely a human emergency transmission, but it's badly damaged. Can you clean it up?" "I'm trying, but we need more processing power. This signal has been traveling through space for who knows how long." Rodriguez nodded and started bringing additional systems online. The communications bay came alive with activity as more powerful computers began working on the signal. Slowly, the static and interference began to clear away. "There," Martinez said as the signal became clearer. "It's repeating every 37 minutes. They listened as a human voice emerged from the noise, distorted and full of static, but unmistakably human. The words were broken, mixed with interference, but some phrases came through clearly. "New horizon to any human vessel. Under attack. Colony discovered. They found us." Rodriguez and Martinez looked at each other with growing alarm. The New Horizon had been a research vessel that disappeared 5 years ago during a first contact mission. The ship had been exploring uncharted systems, looking for signs of intelligent life. After losing contact, search teams had found no trace of the vessel or its crew. "Get Admiral Morrison," Rodriguez said grimly. "He needs to hear this." Morrison arrived in the communications bay still wearing his sleeping clothes, but his eyes were alert and focused. He listened to the signal 3 times before speaking. "How old is this transmission?" "Based on the signal decay and distance from the Kepler sector, I estimate it's been traveling for at least 6 months," Rodriguez replied. "Maybe longer." "Can we enhance it further?" "We're already pushing our equipment to its limits, sir, but I might be able to pull out more of the message if we route it through the base's main computer." Morrison nodded. "Do it. And wake up Dr. Foster. If there are alien voices in this transmission, we need her to translate them." Dr. Helen Foster was the base's xenolinguist, an expert in alien languages and communication patterns. She had served during the later years of the Nexus Wars, helping to decode enemy transmissions and develop communication protocols with new species. Like many of the older crew members, she had hoped her war skills would never be needed again. When Foster arrived, she looked tired but alert. Morrison played the enhanced signal for her, and her face grew pale as she listened. "There are definitely alien voices mixed in with the human transmission," she confirmed. "The language is unfamiliar, but the tone and cadence suggest aggressive intent. Can you translate any of it?" Foster worked at her computer for several minutes, running the alien voices through translation programs and comparison databases. Finally, she looked up with a troubled expression. "I can only make out fragments, but what I'm hearing is disturbing. There are references to cleansing and the ancient plague. The word they use for humans translates roughly to contamination or infection." Morrison felt the cold fingers of dread crawling up his spine. "What else?" "There's something about a prophecy or ancient warning. The aliens seem to believe that humans represent some kind of existential threat that must be eliminated. They're not just attacking the New Horizon, they're hunting humans. Specifically, Rodriguez had been working on the signal while Foster translated. "Admiral, I've managed to extract more of the human transmission. You need to hear this." The enhanced signal played through the speakers, and this time the human voice was much clearer. It was Captain Richard Stone, the commanding officer of IDE, the New Horizon. His words sent chills through everyone in the room. "New Horizon to any human vessel. We have discovered a colony in the Kepler 442 system, descendants of the generation ship Pioneer, lost over a century ago. The colony is thriving, over 50,000 people. But we've been found by a hostile alien force. They call themselves the Zephyrian Purge Fleet." Static filled the transmission for several seconds before Stone's voice returned, now more urgent. "The Zephyrians know about Earth. They have star charts. They know about our other colonies. They're not just attacking us. They're gathering information about all human settlements. They believe humans are a threat to the galaxy that must be eliminated." Before we spread further, the transmission dissolved into weapons fire and screaming. In the background, alien voices could be heard giving orders in their harsh, guttural language. Then Captain Stone's voice came through one last time, weak and desperate. "They're boarding the ship. They're taking prisoners, studying us. If anyone receives this transmission, warn Earth, warn all human colonies. The Zephyrians are coming for all of us. They won't stop until every human in the galaxy is dead." The signal ended in a burst of static. The communications bay fell silent except for the hum of equipment. Morrison stared at the speakers as if they might suddenly start talking again. Finally, he turned to his crew. "How many people heard this transmission?" "Just us, sir," Martinez replied. "I routed it to a secure channel." "Good. I want this classified at the highest level until we know more. Rodriguez, I need you to analyze every bit of data we have about the Kepler sector. Look for any signs of ship movements, energy signatures, anything that might tell us what happened to the New Horizon and this colony." "Yes, sir." "Foster, I want you to learn everything you can about this Zephyrian language. If they're really coming for human colonies, we need to understand their communications." Morrison paused, looking out at the stars through the communications bay's small window. Somewhere out there, 50,000 humans had been living peacefully on a forgotten colony world. The descendants of the generation ship Pioneer had built a new life in the darkness between stars, probably never knowing that their home world had grown into a galactic power. Now they were gone, or worse, captured by aliens who saw humanity as a plague to be eliminated. "Sir," Martinez said quietly, "what are we going to do?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years and hard decisions. "We're going to wake up the fleet." Rodriguez looked up from his console. "Sir?" "The Lazarus Protocol," Morrison said. "It's time to bring our sleeping giants back to life." Foster stared at him. She remembered the Lazarus Protocol from the war days. It was the emergency activation system for humanity's mothballed war fleets, designed to bring the entire military back to full combat readiness in case of existential threat. "Admiral, are you sure? Once we activate Lazarus, there's no going back. Every ship, every weapon system, every piece of military hardware we've kept in storage will come online. The galaxy will know that humanity is preparing for war." Morrison thought about Captain Stone's last transmission, about 50,000 colonists who had been living peaceful lives until the Zephyrian Purge Fleet found them. He thought about the alien voices talking about cleansing and contamination, about eliminating the human plague before it could spread. "Dr. Foster," he said quietly, "the galaxy is about to learn that sometimes the plague fights back." Admiral Morrison stood before the secure communication terminal in his private office, his hand hovering over the biometric scanner. The Lazarus Protocol authorization required three things: his command codes, his genetic signature, and a decision that could change the course of galactic history. He pressed his palm to the scanner and spoke clearly into the microphone. Admiral Jake Morrison, Commanding Officer Aurora Base, authorization code Omega 77 Charlie. I hereby activate the Lazarus Protocol under Article 12 of the Human Defense Charter. Existential threat to human civilian populations. The terminal glowed red for a moment, then shifted to amber as secure channels opened across human space. Morrison's authorization was being verified by the Central Command computers on Earth, cross-referenced with threat assessments and emergency protocols that had been dormant for 15 years. The light turned green. Across the galaxy, automated. Systems that had been sleeping in the depths of hidden bases and mothballed shipyards suddenly came to life. The awakening had begun. At the Titan shipyards, Captain Lisa Hayes was reviewing maintenance reports when every alarm on the USS Vengeance started sounding at once. She ran to the bridge, her crew stumbling behind her as emergency lighting bathed. "The corridor's in red. Report," she called as she reached her command chair. "All systems coming online, Captain," reported Lieutenant Commander Steve Miller from the engineering station. "Main reactor is cycling up to full power. Weapons systems are initializing. The AI is requesting immediate status updates from all departments." Hayes stared at the displays showing her ship coming alive around her. The Vengeance was huge, over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand the fire of entire fleets. For 15 years it had been sleeping, its mighty systems running on minimal power. Now it was waking up, and the ship seemed eager for action. "Captain," Miller continued, "I'm receiving activation orders for the entire 7th Fleet. The Titan yards are coming online. All ships are being prepped for immediate deployment." Hayes felt her heart racing. The 7th Fleet was one of humanity's heavy assault formations, designed to break enemy defensive lines and eliminate major threats. If the 7th was being activated, something terrible was happening. "Get me a communication link to Earth. Command," she ordered. "I need to know what we're facing." On Earth, General Pete Collins was pulled from a diplomatic dinner by his aide, Major Claire Thompson. Collins commanded the Human Defense Forces, a position that had become largely ceremonial, as humanity focused on peaceful expansion. Now, as he read the activation orders on his secure tablet, he realized his job was about to become very real again. "How many ships are responding to the activation?" he asked, as they rushed toward the command center. "All of them, sir," Thompson replied. "Every mothballed vessel, every reserve unit, every piece of military hardware we've kept in storage. The computers estimate we'll have operational fleets within 72 hours. Collins nodded grimly. The Lazarus Protocol was designed to bring humanity's entire military capacity online as quickly as possible. During peacetime, most ships operated with skeleton crews or were completely unmanned, maintained by automated systems. But when Lazarus activated, recall orders went out to every veteran, every reserve officer, every person who had ever served in the human military. They would come. Collins knew they would come, because despite 15 years of peace, they all remembered what it was like when humanity had to fight for its survival. In the outer colonies, ships that had been converted to civilian use suddenly received override commands. The cargo hauler Iron Mountain had once been the assault cruiser Thunderstrike. Now its civilian captain, Tony Williams, watched in amazement as military systems he thought had been permanently disabled came back online. "This is crazy," muttered his first officer, Beth Parker. "I thought these war systems were stripped out years ago." Williams shook his head. "They were never removed, just powered down and locked behind military authorization codes. Looks like someone with very high clearance just unlocked them." The Iron Mountain's cargo hold began to reconfigure itself, revealing weapon systems and armor plating that had been hidden beneath civilian modifications. Williams had served as a captain during the final years of the Nexus Wars. He knew what this ship could do when it was fully operational. "Beth, start sending messages to every qualified crew member in this system. We're going back to war." At Aurora Base, Morrison watched the activation reports flooding in from across human space. Ships were coming online faster than the computers had predicted. Veterans were responding to recall orders with surprising speed. The sleeping giant was waking up, and it was angry. "Admiral," Katie Martinez called from her station, "I'm getting a priority communication from Earth Command." Morrison nodded. "Put it through." General Collins appeared on the main screen, his face grim but determined. "Jake, I got your activation request. 50,000 civilians?" "At minimum, sir. The colony ship Pioneer was thought lost over a century ago. Turns out they made it to the Kepler sector and built a thriving settlement. Now it's gone, and we have evidence that the attackers are specifically targeting human populations." Collins absorbed this information. "Do we know who's responsible?" "A species calling themselves the Zephyrian Purge Fleet. Our xenolinguist has translated some of their communications. They see humanity as a plague that needs to be eliminated before we spread further into the galaxy." "Genocide," Collins said flatly. "Yes, sir." Collins was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "The activation is approved. We're bringing everything online. How long do you need to prepare a response?" Morrison had been thinking about that question since he authorized the Lazarus Protocol. 72 hours for full fleet deployment. But, sir, I recommend we don't rush into this. The Zephyrians have been studying us, learning our tactics. If we're going to respond, we need to do it right." "Agreed. I'm placing you in operational command of the response force. Choose your ships and crews carefully, Jake. If these aliens really are planning to eliminate humanity, we need to send a message that will make them think twice." After the communication ended, Morrison turned to find his senior staff waiting for him. Rodriguez, Martinez, Foster, and several other officers had gathered in the command center, their faces showing a mixture of anticipation and worry. "You all heard that," Morrison said. "We're going to war. Not because we want to, but because someone out there has decided that humanity doesn't deserve to exist." Dr. Foster stepped forward. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the Zephyrian transmissions. Their language suggests they've been planning this for a long time. The attack on the colony wasn't random. It was part of a larger campaign to eliminate human presence in space. How large a campaign? Unknown, but they have detailed information about human settlements, trade routes, even Earth itself. They've been watching us, studying us, preparing for a war we didn't even know was coming." Morrison felt a cold anger building in his chest. The Zephyrians thought they could eliminate humanity like some kind of infestation. They had attacked peaceful colonists, destroyed the New Horizon, and were planning to strike at other human settlements. They had no idea what they had just awakened. "Rodriguez, how long before our nearest combat vessels can reach the Kepler sector?" "The fast attack ships can be there in 6 days, sir. The heavy units will take longer." "Good. Start preparing a task force. I want our best ships and our most experienced crews. We're going to find out what happened to that colony, and we're going to make sure the Zephyrians understand that attacking humans comes with consequences." As his crew dispersed to carry out their orders, Morrison returned to the observation deck. The stars looked the same as they had that morning, but everything had changed. Somewhere out there, human colonies were in danger. Families were being threatened by aliens who saw them as nothing more than a plague to be eliminated. The Zephyrians had made a critical mistake. They had given humanity a reason to remember why they had built the most feared military in the galaxy. For 15 years, that military had slept peacefully, its weapons cold and its crews scattered. Now it was waking up. And when humanity went to war, the galaxy trembled. Morrison thought about Captain Hayes on the USS Vengeance, probably feeling her ship's massive engines come to full power for the first time in years. He thought about General Collins on Earth, coordinating the largest military activation in human history. He thought about the thousands of veterans who were right now dropping everything to answer the call to service. The Zephyrian Purge Fleet thought they were hunting a weak prey. They were about to discover that they had awakened the most dangerous predator in the galaxy. The hidden world of Haven Prime had been humanity's best-kept secret for 30 years. Located in a system that appeared empty on all star charts, the planet housed the largest military complex ever built. As the Lazarus Protocol spread across human space, Haven Prime transformed from a quiet maintenance facility into the beating heart of humanity's war machine. Deep beneath the planet's surface, automated systems that had been dormant for over a decade suddenly roared to life. Massive elevators began carrying ships from underground storage bays to the surface. These weren't the exploration vessels and trade ships that most of the galaxy associated with modern humanity. These were the warships that had ended the Nexus Wars, preserved in perfect condition and ready for battle. Commander Nick Sullivan stood on the bridge of his newly reactivated ship and marveled at the sight outside. The stealth destroyer Shadow. Strike had been his command during the final campaigns of the Nexus Wars. Now, 15 years later, he was back where he belonged. The ship's stealth systems were already online, making it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. "All systems are green, Commander," reported Lieutenant Amy Johnson from the engineering station. "Stealth generators at full power, weapons systems armed and ready. She's exactly the same as the day we put her to sleep." Sullivan nodded, watching as dozens of other ships emerged from the underground facilities around them. Each one represented a specific capability, a particular kind of warfare that humanity had perfected during the dark years. Together, they formed a fleet that could challenge any power in the galaxy. The massive carrier Earth's Wrath was the most impressive sight. Over 3 kilometers long, it could carry 500 fighter craft and support vessels. Captain Tony Williams had transferred his flag to the carrier as soon as the activation orders came through. He stood on the bridge watching as automated systems loaded fighters into the launch bays. "Captain," called his communications officer, Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez, "we're receiving squadron assignments from Fleet Command. Looks like we're the primary strike carrier for Task Force Alpha." Williams studied the tactical displays showing the fleet's organization. Task Force Alpha would be the primary assault force designed to seek out and destroy the Zephyrian Purge Fleet. Task Force Bravo would focus on defending human colonies and evacuation operations. Task Force Charlie's mission was classified, but Williams had served long enough to know what that meant. Charlie would handle the missions that nobody talked about afterward. On the medical ship Mercy's Hand, Dr. Laura Bennett supervised the loading of specialized medical equipment. She had hoped never to see a mobile surgical unit again, but the recall orders had been clear. When humanity went to war, they needed medics who understood combat wounds and trauma surgery. "Doctor," called her assistant, Nurse Gary Lopez. "The stasis pods are online and ready. We can handle up to 500 critical cases." Bennett nodded grimly. The stasis pods were designed to keep severely wounded soldiers alive during transport to major medical facilities. The fact that they were being loaded onto her ship meant that someone expected heavy casualties. She thought about the young officers and enlisted personnel who would soon be heading into combat. Many of them had never seen real war, had never experienced the kind of violence that had shaped the older generation. Bennett had served during the worst battles of the Nexus Wars. She knew what war did to people, both physically and mentally. At the Tactical Planning Center, Admiral Morrison worked with his senior staff to organize the response. The activation had been more successful than anyone had expected. Ships that were supposed to take weeks to reach full operational status were reporting ready for combat in days. "Admiral," reported Chief Intelligence Officer Ryan Blake, "we've intercepted communications from several alien governments. They're aware that we're mobilizing our fleets. The Galactic Council has requested an emergency session to discuss human military activity." Morrison looked up from the tactical displays. "What's our response?" "General Collins is handling diplomatic communications." His message was simple. "Humanity is responding to an unprovoked attack on our civilians. We'll stand down when the threat is eliminated." "Good. What about intelligence on the Zephyrians?" Blake brought up new data on the main screen. "We found references to them in old intelligence files. They're a military theocracy that believes in something called the Great Cleansing. According to their religious texts, certain species represent threats to galactic stability and must be eliminated before they can spread." Morrison studied the information. "And they consider us one of these threatening species?" "It appears so, sir. The concerning part is that they've been planning this for decades. The attack on the colony wasn't opportunistic. It was part of a systematic campaign to gather intelligence about human capabilities and weaknesses." Dr. Foster, who had been working to decode more Zephyrian communications, looked up from her station. "Admiral, I've translated more of their transmissions. They're not just planning to attack isolated colonies. They have target lists for major human settlements, including Earth itself." The command center fell silent. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about rescuing colonists or punishing raiders. The Zephyrians were planning the systematic extermination of humanity. "How many ships do they have?" Morrison asked. Blake checked his files. "Unknown, but intelligence estimates suggest a substantial fleet. They've been building up their forces for years, specifically to deal with what they call the human problem." Morrison nodded and turned to address his staff. "Then we need to make sure they understand that the human problem is bigger than they think." On the bridge of the USS Vengeance, Captain Lisa Hayes watched as her ship's massive weapons systems came online. The main guns were designed to crack the hulls of the largest enemy vessels, while the point defense systems could destroy entire squadrons of fighters. For 15 years, these weapons had been silent. Now they hummed with barely contained energy. "Captain," reported her weapons officer, Lieutenant Paul Mitchell, "all weapon systems are fully operational. Main batteries are loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Point defense systems are armed and tracking." Hayes nodded. The Vengeance was more than just a warship. It was a symbol of human military power. During the Nexus Wars, enemy fleets had surrendered rather than face ships like this one. Now it would serve that purpose again, reminding the galaxy why humanity's warships were feared. "Communications, send a message to all ships in the fleet," Hayes ordered. "This is Captain Hayes of the USS Vengeance. We're going to war not because we want to, but because someone out there thinks they can eliminate humanity without consequences. They're about to learn that we've never forgotten how to fight. Across the fleet, similar messages were being sent. Veterans who had hoped never to see combat again were preparing for battle. Young officers who had trained for a war they thought would never come were about to face the reality of violence on a galactic scale. The assembly at Haven Prime represented more than just military preparation. It was a statement that humanity, despite 15 years of peaceful development, had never truly disarmed. The sleeping giant was awakening, and its first stirrings were already sending shockwaves across the galaxy. In the fighter bays of the Earth's Wrath, Pilot Major Claire Thompson ran her hands over the controls of her interceptor. The ship had been in storage for over a decade, but it responded to her touch like an old friend. She had flown missions during the final battles of the Nexus Wars, had seen what happened when humanity's enemies underestimated their determination. "All pilots to briefing room 7, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. "Mission planning begins in 10 minutes. Thompson smiled grimly as she headed for the briefing. The Zephyrians thought they were hunting defenseless colonists. They were about to discover that humanity's prey could bite back. As the fleet prepared for departure, Morrison received a final communication from Earth. General Collins appeared on the secure channel, his expression serious but determined. "Jake, the politicians are nervous about this deployment. They're worried about galactic opinion, about starting a war we might not be able to finish." Morrison thought about the 50,000 colonists who had been living peacefully until the Zephyrians found them. "Sir, the war has already started. We're just now deciding how it's going to end." Collins nodded. "Understood. You have full authorization to use whatever force is necessary to protect human civilians. The galaxy needs to understand that attacking humanity comes with consequences." As the communication ended, Morrison looked out at the assembled fleet. Hundreds of ships, thousands of crew members, all preparing to venture into the dark to face an enemy that wanted to eliminate humanity from the galaxy. The Zephyrians had made a critical error. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and that giant was very, very angry. The human fleet departed Haven Prime not as a rescue mission, but as something far more dangerous, a hunting expedition. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the heavy cruiser Retribution, watching as hundreds of ships formed into their assigned task forces. The sight would have terrified any enemy observer. This wasn't the peaceful exploration fleet that the galaxy had grown accustomed to seeing. This was humanity's war machine in full operation. Morrison divided his forces into 3 distinct groups, each with a specific mission that would demonstrate different aspects of human military capability. The aliens who had been testing humanity's borders for months were about to learn that they had gravely miscalculated. Task Force Alpha, led by Captain Hayes aboard the USS Vengeance, would track the Zephyrian Purge fleet using humanity's most advanced sensor technology. Their mission was to find the enemy and determine their strength. But Morrison had given Hayes additional orders that weren't in the official mission briefings. Alpha Group would show the galaxy that humanity could find anyone, anywhere, no matter how well they tried to hide. "Captain Hayes," Morrison said over the secure communication channel, "remember that this isn't just about finding the Zephyrians. Every alien intelligence service in the galaxy will be watching our movements. I want them to understand that when humanity decides to hunt something down, it gets found." Hayes nodded from her command chair. "Understood, Admiral. We'll make sure the galaxy gets the message. Task Force Bravo, under Captain Williams aboard the carrier Earth's Wrath, had the mission of securing human settlements and evacuating civilians from potential danger zones. But this, too, was more than a simple defensive operation. Williams was to demonstrate humanity's ability to move large numbers of people and resources across vast distances in very short time periods. "Tony," Morrison addressed Williams, "I want you to visit every human colony in a 50-light-year radius. Show them our flag, make sure they're safe, and let them know that humanity hasn't forgotten how to protect its own." Williams understood the underlying message. The evacuation mission would serve as a massive show of force, demonstrating humanity's logistical capabilities to any observers. When the galaxy saw human ships appearing simultaneously at dozens of star systems, they would realize that humanity's military reach was far greater than anyone had suspected. Task Force Charlie had the most sensitive mission of all. Led by the mysterious Colonel Frank Davis, Charlie Group's objective was classified at the highest levels. Even Morrison's senior staff didn't know the full details. Davis commanded humanity's Special Operations Forces, the units that handled missions too dangerous or too morally ambiguous for conventional military forces. "Frank," Morrison said in a private communication, "you know what needs to be done. The galaxy has been testing our resolve for months. Small raids, cargo delays, territorial disputes. Time to remind them why they used to be afraid of us." Davis nodded grimly. Charlie Group would visit the species that had been probing human defenses, starting with the Korthak Confederation, but they wouldn't attack directly. Instead, they would demonstrate capabilities that would make every alien government reconsider their assessment of human military strength. The hunt for the Zephyrians began with a systematic examination of the evidence. Navigator Officer Kelly Brown worked with the fleet's best analysts to trace the path of destruction left by the Purge fleet. The aliens had been methodical in their attacks, but they had also been careless, leaving behind signs that human sensors could detect and follow. "Admiral," Brown reported from her position on the Retribution's bridge, "we've identified at least 7 attack sites over the past 2 years. The Zephyrians have been targeting isolated human settlements, studying our defensive capabilities, and gathering intelligence." Morrison studied the tactical display showing the attack pattern. "What's their next most likely target?" "Based on their movement pattern and the intelligence they've gathered, they appear to be heading toward the Centauri cluster. There are 3 human colonies in that region, all lightly defended." The Admiral nodded. "Send word to Captain Hayes. Alpha Group is to proceed to Centauri at maximum speed. If the Zephyrians are planning another attack, we need to be there first." As the human fleet spread out across space, their movements were being watched by intelligence services throughout the galaxy. The Korthak Confederation, who had been conducting raids against human mining operations, suddenly found their own border systems under observation by ships that appeared to be civilian cargo haulers. But the Korthak military analysts quickly realized that these merchants carried sensor arrays more sophisticated than most military vessels. Commander Beth Parker, operating the disguised destroyer Quick Strike, monitored Korthak communications from just outside their territorial boundaries. The enemy was growing nervous, sending encrypted messages about unusual human activity and possible military buildup. Parker smiled as she recorded every transmission. Let them worry. Fear was a weapon, and humanity was very good at using it. Meanwhile, the real detective work was being done by Chief Investigator Paul Mitchell aboard the research vessel Discovery. Mitchell was a former intelligence officer who specialized in crime scene analysis and forensic investigation. His job was to visit the sites of Zephyrian attacks and pieced together exactly what had happened. At the ruins of the research station Gamma 7, Mitchell's team found evidence that chilled them to the bone. The Zephyrians hadn't just destroyed the facility. They had conducted experiments on the human staff before killing them. The aliens were studying human psychology, testing response times, analyzing combat effectiveness. Admiral, Mitchell reported via secure transmission, the Zephyrians aren't just conducting military operations. They're conducting research. They want to understand how humans fight, how we think, how we react under stress. Morrison absorbed this information with growing anger. The attacks weren't random acts of violence. They were scientific studies. With human beings as the test subjects, what kind of research, Paul? Combat effectiveness studies, primarily. They've been testing human response times, analyzing our tactical thinking, studying our weapons and equipment. It's like they're preparing for a larger conflict by learning everything they can about how humans wage war. This changed everything. The Zephyrians weren't just planning to eliminate humanity. They were preparing for a war they expected to be difficult and prolonged. They understood that humans were dangerous opponents, and they were doing their homework before launching a full-scale attack. Morrison opened a communication channel to all task force commanders. New intelligence indicates that the Zephyrians have been studying human military capabilities for at least 2 years. They know we're dangerous and they're preparing accordingly. This isn't going to be the easy campaign they thought they were starting. On the USS Vengeance, Captain Hayes received this information as her ship's sensors detected something unusual in the Centauri system. Admiral, we're picking up energy signatures consistent with Zephyrian vessels. They're in the outer system, watching the colony on Centauri Prime. Morrison felt his pulse quicken. How many ships? At least 12. Possibly more. They're using some kind of stealth technology, but our quantum sensors can penetrate it. They appear to be conducting reconnaissance, probably preparing for an attack. Distance to your position? 6 hours at maximum speed. Morrison made his decision. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. We have located Zephyrian forces preparing to attack human civilians. This is what we came here to do. Alpha Group will engage and destroy the enemy. Bravo and Charlie Groups will continue their assigned missions. It's time to show the galaxy that attacking humanity comes with consequences. As the human fleet accelerated toward battle, Morrison thought about the colonists on Centauri Prime. They were probably going about their daily lives unaware that alien ships were watching them from the darkness, planning their destruction. The Zephyrians saw those colonists as subjects for study, as specimens to be examined and eliminated. They were about to learn that humanity saw them as family to be protected. The hunt was about to become a battle, and the galaxy was about to remember why humanity's warships had once been the most feared sight in space. The Zephyrians had spent 2 years studying human military capabilities, learning about human tactics and weapons. But there was one thing they hadn't learned, one aspect of human warfare that couldn't be studied from a distance. They didn't understand. What happened when humanity got angry? They were about to find out. Morrison looked at the tactical display showing his ships closing in on the enemy. The Zephyrians thought they were the hunters. They were about to discover that they had become the prey. The Zephyrian research facility hung in the void like a metallic cancer, its dark hull bristling with sensor arrays and communication equipment. Built around the captured hull of a human colony ship, the station served as a mobile laboratory, where the aliens conducted their studies on captured humans. For 6 months, it had been a place of horror and scientific cruelty. Today, it would become something else entirely. Humanity's first target in a war the Zephyrians had started, but would not finish. Commander Nick Sullivan watched the facility through the stealth systems of his destroyer Shadow Strike. His ship hung invisible in space, its advanced stealth technology making it undetectable to Zephyrian sensors. Around him, his crew worked in tense silence, preparing for humanity's first military engagement in 15 years. "Range to target?" Sullivan asked quietly. 2,000 kilometers in closing, reported his navigation officer, Lieutenant Steve Miller. "Stealth systems are holding steady. They have no idea we're here." Sullivan studied the tactical display showing the research facility. Intelligence reports indicated that over 300 human prisoners were being held aboard the station, survivors from various attacks who had been taken for experimentation rather than execution. The thought of what those people had endured made Sullivan's jaw clench with barely controlled rage. "Communications. Patch me through to Captain Thompson." Major Claire Thompson commanded the Marine Assault Force aboard the modified cruiser Stormbreaker. Her ship carried 200 of humanity's most elite soldiers, veterans who had learned urban warfare during the brutal final campaigns of the Nexus Wars. If anyone could rescue the prisoners, it would be Thompson's Marines. "Thompson here, Commander. My people are ready to go." "Good. Remember, we need to move fast once we breach their hull. The Zephyrians will try to eliminate the prisoners rather than let them be rescued." "Understood. We'll be in and out before they know what hit them." The rescue operation began with surgical precision. Sullivan's destroyer launched a spread of stealth torpedoes that struck the research facility's shield generators with devastating accuracy. The alien station's defenses collapsed in seconds, leaving it vulnerable to assault. Thompson's assault shuttles launched immediately, racing across the gap between ships before the Zephyrians could react. The first wave of Marines breached the station's hull using plasma cutters, pouring into the alien facility like avenging angels. The Zephyrians had been expecting to study captured humans, not fight them. The alien guards were equipped for handling prisoners, not for combat against soldiers who had perfected the art of close-quarters battle during decades of warfare. Thompson's Marines moved through the station's corridors with ruthless efficiency, their advanced armor and weapons cutting through alien resistance like a knife through paper. "Sector 7 clear," reported Sergeant Gary Lopez over the communication network. "Found 23 human prisoners. They're alive but in bad shape." "Sector 12 clear," called Corporal Janet Clark. 31 prisoners secured. The aliens were running some kind of psychological experiments on them." Thompson coordinated the rescue from the station's central command center, which her team had captured in the first minutes of the assault. The Zephyrian commander, a tall alien with metallic skin and multiple arms, lay dead at her feet, killed when he tried to activate what appeared to be a self-destruct system. "All teams, this is Thompson. We have control of the facility. Begin prisoner evacuation immediately. Intelligence teams, start downloading their computer systems. I want to know everything they learned about us." As the Marines evacuated the human prisoners, the scope of Zephyrian research became clear. The aliens had been conducting systematic studies of human psychology, physiology, and combat effectiveness. They had tortured prisoners to test pain, tolerance, forced them to fight each other to study combat instincts, and dissected captured soldiers to understand human anatomy. Dr. Laura Bennett, who had accompanied the rescue force aboard her medical ship, worked frantically to treat the freed prisoners. Many showed signs of prolonged abuse and psychological trauma. Some had been subjected to surgical procedures that appeared to have no medical purpose other than to satisfy alien curiosity about human biology. Commander Sullivan, Bennett reported over the communication channel, "These people have been through hell. The Zephyrians weren't just studying them, They were torturing them for information about human society, military organization, and defensive capabilities. Sullivan felt his anger growing colder and more focused. This wasn't just an attack on human colonies. It was systematic torture conducted in the name of military intelligence. Doctor, are any of the prisoners able to provide information about other Zephyrian operations? Several of them are scientists from the research vessel, New Horizon. Dr. Janet Clark was the mission's chief xenobiologist. She's weak but coherent, and she says she has important information about Zephyrian plans. Sullivan ordered Dr. Clark brought to his ship as soon as she was medically stable. Meanwhile, the intelligence teams were making disturbing discoveries in the research facility's computer systems. "Commander," reported Lieutenant Amy Johnson from the intelligence section, "you need to see this. The Zephyrians have detailed files on human military organization, including ship specifications, weapon capabilities, and tactical doctrines. They know almost as much about our military as we do." Sullivan studied the alien data files that his team had retrieved. The Zephyrians had been planning their war against humanity for years, maybe decades. They had infiltrated human space, observed human colonies, and even penetrated some military installations to gather intelligence. But there was something else in the files that made Sullivan's blood run cold. The research facility wasn't an isolated operation. It was part of a network of similar installations scattered throughout Zephyrian space. Hundreds, maybe thousands of human prisoners were being held at other locations, all of them subjects in the alien systematic study of human capabilities. "Communications, get me Admiral Morrison immediately," Sullivan ordered. Morrison's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. "Talk to me, Nick." "Sir, we've secured the facility and rescued over 300 prisoners, but this is bigger than we thought. The Zephyrians have been running a systematic intelligence operation against humanity for years. They have detailed information about our military, our colonies, our defensive capabilities." Morrison absorbed this information. "What about the prisoners? What can they tell us?" Dr. Janet Clark from the New Horizon is being debriefed now. "Admiral, the things they did to these people, the Zephyrians aren't just planning to attack us. They're planning to eliminate us completely, and they've been preparing for years." "Any indication of their next target?" Sullivan checked the intelligence reports. "According to the data we recovered, they're planning a major operation against Earth itself. This research was designed to help them develop tactics for attacking the human homeworld." The communication channel fell silent for a moment as Morrison processed this information. When he spoke again, his voice carried a cold determination that Sullivan had rarely heard. "Nick, I want you to destroy that facility completely. Leave nothing behind that the Zephyrians can use, and make sure the destruction is visible to every sensor in the system. I want the galaxy to see what happens to anyone who tortures human civilians." "Yes, sir." As the last of the prisoners were evacuated, Sullivan's crew prepared the research facility for destruction. They planted charges throughout the alien station, focusing on the areas where the most horrific experiments had been conducted. The destruction of the facility was spectacular and deliberate. Sullivan's ship fired its main guns into the station's core, causing a chain reaction that could be seen from several light years away. The explosion was designed to send a message. Humanity had returned to war, and they would show no mercy to enemies who tortured their people. In the medical bay of the rescue fleet, Dr. Bennett worked to treat the freed prisoners while listening to their stories. What she heard confirmed her worst fears about the Zephyrian research program. "They wanted to know how we think," whispered one of the survivors. a Marine who had been captured during the attack on his transport ship. They kept asking about human military organization, about how we choose our leaders, about what makes us fight so hard for each other. Another prisoner, a civilian engineer, added his own testimony. They couldn't understand why humans would risk their lives for strangers. They kept running tests, trying to figure out what they called our pack loyalty behavior. Dr. Bennett realized that the Zephyrians had been trying to understand the one aspect of human warfare that couldn't be learned from studying weapons or tactics. They wanted to know what made humans willing to die for each other, what drove them to fight against impossible odds when survival meant abandoning their comrades. They had tortured hundreds of people trying to understand human loyalty and determination. Now they were about to experience those qualities firsthand. As the rescue fleet departed the destroyed research facility, Sullivan opened a communication channel to all ships in the human fleet. "This is Commander Sullivan to all vessels. We have successfully rescued. The Zephyrian Purge fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a swarm of metallic locusts. 347 ships ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift assault cruisers, all bristling with weapons, designed to eliminate what their commanders believed was a weak and defenseless prey. Admiral Keth Tar, the Zephyrian fleet commander, stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. "Status report," he commanded in the harsh, guttural language of his species. "All ships have successfully translated into normal space," reported his tactical officer. "Long-range sensors are detecting minimal defensive activity around the third planet. A few patrol vessels, some orbital platforms, nothing that poses a significant threat." Keth Tar's multiple arms gestured approvingly. The intelligence gathered from years of studying captured humans had proven accurate. Earth was defended by the same peaceful exploration fleet that his forces had observed throughout human space. The homeworld of humanity's military power appeared to be protected by nothing more than system patrol boats and commercial vessels. "Begin the approach to the inner system," Keth Tar ordered. "Maintain fleet formation. When we reach the third planet, we will eliminate all military installations and capture the shipyards intact. The human plague ends today." As the Zephyrian fleet moved deeper into the solar system, their sensors detected exactly what they expected to see. A few dozen human ships moved in standard patrol patterns around Earth and its moon. The massive orbital shipyards continued their peaceful operations, showing no signs of military preparation. Even the space stations maintained normal civilian traffic patterns. What the Zephyrian sensors didn't detect were the hundreds of human warships hiding in the shadows throughout the solar system. Ships like the USS Vengeance lay powered down, behind Earth's moon, their stealth systems making them invisible to alien sensors. The carrier Earth's Wrath floated dead in space among the asteroids, its massive bulk disguised as mining debris. On Aurora Base, now positioned in Earth's outer system, Admiral Morrison watched the approaching enemy fleet with cold satisfaction. "Communications. Open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship. Let's see if we can end this without unnecessary bloodshed." Morrison's voice echoed across space in perfect Zephyrian, a language he had learned specifically for this moment. Zephyrian. "Fleet, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Forces. You have entered our home system with hostile intent. I am offering you one opportunity to withdraw peacefully." The response came quickly, filled with religious fervor and alien arrogance. "Human plague bearer, your species' time of contamination is ended. We come to cleanse the galaxy of your presence. There will be no mercy, no negotiation, no survival." Morrison smiled grimly. Admiral Kethtar, you've spent years studying human military capabilities. You think you understand what we're capable of in warfare. You're about to learn the difference between studying something and experiencing it. The Admiral activated the command sequence that would spring the largest military trap in galactic history. Throughout the solar system, hundreds of previously invisible ships suddenly appeared on sensors as their stealth systems deactivated. Weapon platforms hidden among asteroids came online, their targeting systems locking onto Zephyrian vessels. The orbital defense grid around Earth revealed its true strength as massive guns emerged from what had appeared to be civilian installations. All ships, Morrison announced over the fleet communication network. This is it. Show them what happens when someone threatens our home. The battle began not as a fight, but as a demonstration of overwhelming force. Captain Hayes aboard the USS Vengeance led the Anvil force in a coordinated assault that struck the Zephyrian fleet's front formations with devastating precision. The alien ships, expecting to face patrol boats and civilian vessels, instead found themselves under attack by dreadnoughts that could destroy entire squadrons with single volleys. Target their command ships first, Hayes ordered as her gunners locked onto the enemy flagship. Let's make sure their leadership understands what they're facing. The Vengeance's main batteries spoke with the voice of concentrated destruction. Armor-piercing rounds designed to penetrate the thickest alien hulls struck Keth-Tar's flagship like the fist of an angry god. The Zephyrian vessel's shields collapsed under the assault, its hull splitting open to vent atmosphere and burning debris into space. Captain Williams brought the Earth's wrath into the battle with calculated fury. The massive carrier launched wave after wave of fighters and bombers, but these weren't exploration craft or civilian shuttles. These were military fighters piloted by veterans who had learned their trade during the brutal campaigns of the Nexus. War's Major Claire Thompson led her fighter squadron in a perfectly coordinated strike against the Zephyrian cruiser formations. "Remember your training?" she called over the communication network. "These aliens have been studying us for years, trying to understand how we fight. Time to give them a practical demonstration." The Zephyrian fleet tried to respond with their own weapons, but they quickly discovered that their intelligence had been catastrophically incomplete. The ships they were fighting weren't the peaceful exploration vessels they had studied. These were warships designed by a species that had perfected the art of interstellar warfare during decades of conflict. Commander Nick Sullivan's stealth destroyer materialized directly behind the Zephyrian battle line, its advanced weapon systems targeting the alien ship's engine sections. "This is for the prisoners you tortured," he said quietly as his ship opened fire. The aliens who had spent months studying human military psychology were about to experience human anger firsthand. But the most shocking moment came when Colonel Davis activated humanity's most classified weapons. The quantum disruptor array, hidden on the dark side of Earth's moon, fired a coherent beam of energy that struck the center of the Zephyrian formation. Instead of destroying the alien ships, the beam disabled them completely, leaving them floating helpless in space. "Attention, Zephyrian fleet," Morrison's voice echoed across all communication frequencies. "What you just experienced was a demonstration. We could have destroyed your entire fleet with that weapon. Instead, we chose to disable you. This shows you two things about humanity that your studies failed to reveal." Morrison paused, watching as the surviving Zephyrian ships found themselves surrounded by human vessels that had appeared from seemingly empty space. "First, we possess weapons that you never imagined. Technologies developed during wars you know nothing about, against enemies you've never faced. Second, we choose when to show mercy and when to show none. Your research taught you about our weapons and tactics, but it never taught you about our judgment. Admiral Kethtar, his flagship crippled but still functional, managed to send a weak transmission. Impossible. Our intelligence was perfect. We studied your ships, your weapons, your military organization. You studied what we allowed you to study, Morrison replied. For 15 years, the galaxy has seen our exploration fleets, our cargo vessels, our peaceful diplomatic missions. You never saw our war fleets because we chose not to show them to you. Until now. The battle, if it could even be called that, was over within 2 hours. The Zephyrian Purge Fleet, which had expected to destroy Earth in a glorious campaign of extermination, instead found itself completely defeated without inflicting significant damage on a single human vessel. But Morrison wasn't finished. The real message wasn't intended for the Zephyrians. It was for the rest of the galaxy. Open channels to all known species, Morrison ordered. Broadcast this engagement on every frequency, every communication network, every intelligence service in the galaxy. I want everyone to see what happened here. The recording of the battle went out across the galaxy within hours. Every government, every military, every intelligence service received crystal-clear footage of the Zephyrian fleet being effortlessly defeated by ships that had appeared from nowhere. The message was unmistakable. Humanity had never disarmed. They had simply chosen to sleep. Dr. Janet Clark sat in the medical bay of Admiral Morrison's flagship, her hands shaking as she reviewed the intelligence data she had memorized during months of captivity. The rescued scientist had endured unspeakable horrors at the hands of the Zephyrians, but she had also observed their operations with the trained eye of a researcher. Now her observations would help humanity prepare for the largest military trap in galactic history. "Admiral," Clark said, her voice still weak from her ordeal. The research facility wasn't just studying human prisoners. It was gathering intelligence for a specific operation. The Zephyrians are planning a direct attack on Earth. Morrison leaned forward in his chair. How specific? Very specific. They have detailed maps of Earth's solar system, including the locations of defense platforms, patrol routes, and military installations. They've been planning this attack for at least 2 years. Clark activated a holographic display showing what she had observed in the alien computers. But Admiral, there's something else. The Zephyrians don't just want to destroy Earth. They want to eliminate humanity's ability to wage war. They're planning to capture our shipyards, our manufacturing facilities, our command centers. They want to end human military power permanently. Morrison studied the intelligence data with growing understanding. The Zephyrians had made the same mistake that many of humanity's enemies had made during the Nexus Wars. They thought they understood human military capabilities based on what they could observe and study. They had no idea what humanity was capable of when truly threatened. Doctor, in your estimation, how large a force are they planning to bring against Earth? Clark consulted her memories of the alien planning sessions she had been forced to witness. At least 300 ships, possibly more. They're gathering fleets from across their territory. This isn't a raid or a limited strike. It's a full-scale invasion designed to end the war in a single battle. Morrison smiled grimly. That was exactly what humanity needed. Communications. Get me General Collins on Earth. Priority 1. When Collins appeared on the secure channel, Morrison didn't waste time with pleasantries. Pete, the Zephyrians are coming for Earth. Dr. Clark has intelligence indicating a major assault force, possibly 300 ships or more. Collins absorbed this information without visible emotion. Time frame? Unknown. but they're mobilizing now. We need to prepare Earth's defenses for the largest battle in human history. Jake, are you sure we want to fight this battle at Earth? We could intercept them in deep space. Keep the fighting away from populated areas. Morrison shook his head. No, Pete, this is exactly what we need. The Zephyrians want to bring their entire fleet to our home system for a decisive battle. Let them come. When we're done with them, every species in the galaxy will understand that attacking humanity comes with consequences. Collins understood immediately. You want to turn Earth into a trap. The biggest trap ever built. I want the Zephyrians to arrive expecting to destroy our homeworld and instead find themselves facing the full might of human military power. When this battle is over, the galaxy will remember why they used to fear our ships. The preparation of Earth's solar system began immediately. General Patricia Young, commander of Earth Defense Command, coordinated the most massive military operation in human history. Ships that had been deployed across the galaxy began converging on the Sol system, but they didn't take up obvious defensive positions. Instead, they hid among asteroids, behind planets, and in the shadows of space stations. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez oversaw the installation of weapon systems that humanity had built during the Nexus Wars, but never deployed. These weren't just ship killers. They were fleet killers, designed to end wars in single engagements. Hidden bases throughout the asteroid belt activated weapons that could destroy entire battle groups. Admiral Morrison, Rodriguez reported via secure communication, the orbital defense grid is online and ready. We've positioned antimatter mines throughout the outer system, stealth platforms behind Jupiter's moons, and heavy guns in the asteroid belt that can engage targets at extreme range. Morrison nodded as he reviewed the tactical preparations. Earth's solar system was becoming the most heavily defended location in the galaxy, but the defenses were hidden, designed to remain invisible until the moment they were needed. On the hidden moon base sanctuary, Colonel Frank Davis supervised the activation of humanity's most classified weapon systems. These were technologies that had been developed during the darkest days of the Nexus Wars, weapons so destructive that they had been locked away when peace was declared. "Colonel," reported his technical officer, Lieutenant Chris Anderson, "the quantum disruptor array is online and charged. Target acquisition systems are functioning normally." Davis nodded grimly. The quantum disruptor was designed to disable entire fleets without destroying them, demonstrating humanity's capacity for both overwhelming force and unexpected mercy. When the Zephyrians arrived, they would face weapons they had never imagined. As Earth's defenses came online, Admiral Morrison made a decision that would define the coming battle. Rather than positioning his fleet in a traditional defensive formation, he would let the Zephyrians enter the Sol system and then spring the trap from all directions simultaneously. Captain Hayes aboard the USS Vengeance would command the Anvil force, positioned behind Earth, where the Zephyrians would expect to find the primary human fleet. Captain Williams and the carrier Earth's Wrath would lead the Hammer Force, hidden in the asteroid belt and ready to strike the enemy's rear when the battle began. The most critical element of the trap was Task Force Charlie, still under Colonel Davis's command. Charlie's ships were equipped with the most advanced stealth technology humanity possessed, making them completely invisible to enemy sensors. They would position themselves directly in the path of the approaching Zephyrian fleet, ready to strike at the moment of maximum confusion. "All commanders," Morrison announced over the fleet communication network, "the Zephyrians think they're coming to destroy our homeworld. Instead, they're flying into the most sophisticated military trap ever constructed. When this battle is over, The galaxy will understand that humanity's peaceful nature should never be mistaken for weakness. The trap was set within 72 hours. To external observers, Earth appeared to be defended by a small fleet of patrol vessels and system defense platforms. The massive orbital shipyards continued their peaceful operations, showing no signs of military preparation. Even the most sophisticated alien intelligence services saw only what humanity wanted them to see, a homeworld vulnerable to attack. But hidden throughout the solar system, the most powerful military force in galactic history waited for its prey to arrive. Dr. Clark, still recovering in the medical bay, provided additional intelligence about Zephyrian fleet composition and tactics. Admiral, they're expecting to face the same kind of ships they've been studying. Exploration vessels, cargo haulers, maybe some patrol boats. They have no idea that humanity has maintained its war fleet. Morrison thought about the ships hiding throughout the solar system. The Zephyrians had studied human military capabilities for years, but they had only seen what humanity allowed them to see. They had observed the peaceful fleet that conducted trade and exploration missions. They had never seen the warships that had ended the Nexus Wars, the vessels that had made entire species surrender rather than face them in battle. Doctor, in your opinion, what will the Zephyrians do when they realize they've flown into a trap? Clark considered the question carefully. Based on what I observed, they're fanatics. They believe that eliminating humanity is a religious duty. They won't surrender easily, even when faced with overwhelming force. Good, Morrison said quietly. Then when we defeat them, the lesson will be that much more impressive. As the final preparations were completed, Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked out at the seemingly peaceful solar system. Freighters moved between planets, carrying cargo and passengers. Space stations continued their normal operations. The orbital shipyards worked on new exploration vessels and civilian craft. But hidden in the darkness between planets, humanity's war machine waited with patient hunger. The Zephyrians were coming to destroy Earth, expecting to find a soft target, defended by peaceful explorers. Instead, they would find the reason why humanity had once been the most feared military power in the galaxy. The trap was set, the weapons were charged, and the fleets were ready. Now all they had to do was wait for the prey to arrive. Morrison opened a final communication to all human forces. This is Admiral Morrison to all ships and installations. The enemy is coming to our home with the intention of ending human civilization. They think they know what we're capable of because they've been studying us for years. He paused, looking at the tactical display showing hundreds of hidden ships and weapon systems throughout the solar system. They're about to learn that there's a difference between studying something and experiencing it firsthand. Today, the galaxy remembers why humanity built the most feared war fleet in known space. Today, we remind them that peaceful doesn't mean powerless. The greatest military trap in galactic history was ready. Now, humanity waited for its prey to spring it. As the disabled Zephyrian ships were taken into custody, Morrison opened a final communication to their commander. Admiral Kethtar, your fleet came here to eliminate what you called the human plague. Instead, you've provided the galaxy with a valuable lesson about the difference between peaceful and powerless. Morrison looked out at the captured alien fleet, then at his own ships as they began to disperse back to their hidden positions throughout the solar system. You wanted to study human military capabilities. Here's your final lesson. We built the most feared war machine in galactic history, not because we love war, but because we love peace. The galaxy has two choices: accept us as peaceful neighbors, or face the civilization that created weapons you can't imagine and tactics you can't predict. The Zephyrian survivors were given medical treatment and prepared for repatriation to their homeworld, but they would return with a message that would spread throughout their society and beyond. Humanity was not the weak prey they had believed. They were predators who had chosen to hunt only when necessary. Dr. Janet Clark, now fully recovered, delivered her final report to Morrison in his private office. "Admiral, the Zephyrian experiments weren't just about studying our combat effectiveness. They were trying to